The most important, or at least most frequent thing in any education reform is shortly after you put one in place, you change everything and have a different reform. And so we advertised this session with the instructions to please everybody put away their cell phones and put away their laptops. So I need to begin by asking you to please take out your cell phones or laptops because we're going to ask you to use them to get started. So if you could go to show the website. What we've done is we've selected kind of a set of possible topics, and we're going to ask everybody in the audience to basically vote on them, and then we'll pick the top three and have these folks go at it. So if you'd go to menti.com and enter 759232, then you can vote. And we'll spend a couple minutes giving people a chance to do that. And I thought in the meantime, we might have Kate and Ben say about 1 minute each worth about what they do in their organizations. So Kate, you want to?
So my organization's been around since 2000, so I'm the veteran in this little pairing here. We focus on the institutional problems that weaken the health of the teaching profession. So we look at the institutions that have all the authority over teachers, such as state departments of education, school districts, and famously teacher prep programs, which is why we're here today. We look at what those institutions can do differently that will improve the health of the teaching profession. So we're what's known as a policy shop, which is only fully understood by those of us who live in DC. And we prepare a lot of reports, yes, but we're probably known for having a bit of a more hard edge than many other policy shops. We like to give grades to states, but actually tomorrow morning we're coming out with something that's really cool. We're going to be announcing the best districts in the country, great districts for great teachers. So if any of you around tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., we're going to be doing that, and free bagels and giving away some great door prizes that you can do, donate money to great teachers through Donors Choose. So please come tomorrow. That's my commercial.
Thank you, Kate. Ben.
Sure. Hi. Thanks, everyone, for coming this afternoon. It's exciting to be here on the first day. I'm Benjamin Riley. I'm the founder and executive director of an organization called Deans for Impact. We are not old and wise like Kate, but rather young and sprightly. We were founded a few years ago. We're based here in Austin, Texas, but we work with programs all over the country that prepare teachers. So we are not an exclusive policy shop. We actually try to engage with the folks who are actually doing this work, or actually preparing future teachers. We also don't like to grade them and tell them they're doing a terrible job, but rather approach the work in a slightly more growth mindset fashion and try to find ways.
So already the gloves are off.
Exactly. Just as a preview. And it's going to be like that for an hour, so you guys came to the right session. This is not your typical South by Southwest EDU session. So we've been doing that work and do it with a number of leaders all over the country, and have really been inspired to be able to work with them and to really sort of connect with this entire country in the work, the hard work of preparing the teachers who will go into our classrooms. I'm also the one who said we should try this technology thing, so if this doesn't work, it's all on me. So hopefully you found your way to this fun little Swedish app called Menti, and if we could actually flip it over to see the results of the poll, to pick the topics that we're going to debate on. Maybe. There we go.
So, okay, they're in order.
Okay, stop voting. They're moving around too much.
All right. So
it actually works. Well done, guys. Give yourself a round. During South by Southwest, I task you to ask yourself how many of the sessions you go to are actually personalized and use technology. I'll just leave that there. Just leave that there for the second. All right, back to you, Tom.
Was that by any chance a sneaky planned? What we're going to do is we'll spend about the first half hour or so.
Can we get that back up for a second? We just need, do you have the topics written down?
No, not quite. Yeah,
let's just get, so we're going to debate the top three in the time that we have, but we'll also have Q&A, so
right.
There'll be plenty of chance if you want to get other questions in.
So well, in fact, while I'm scribbling, why don't we get started? So we'll go back, we'll do the top three, Then we're going to open it up in the back, calling on, of course, the people who sat in the back by name. Kate, you want to start us off on, is there solid research on what ed schools should do?
So this is a really interesting question because it's not a simple yes and no. Well, there is a very simple answer to part of it. Yes, there is absolutely evidence-based research that should be found on in every teacher preparation program in the country, and unfortunately is not. And that's really what drove the title of this seminar, I believe, because this is the one thing I think Ben and I are more inclined to agree on, is that there is a lot of evidence that hasn't made its way into teacher prep. But the critics will say, well, there's very little that tells us what people should learn in their pre-service preparation. So how do you resolve those two statements? Well, we know what it takes to raise student achievement. We know what it takes for children to learn how to read. We know what has to be taught in elementary mathematics. We know the strategies that are effective at managing classroom behavior. We know the strategies that teachers ought to use to improve student learning and help children retain what they learn. All that is very settled science. We know it's important for ed schools to be selective. All this has been found over and over again. It's not really debated. But what it hasn't been, we haven't studied whether learning that stuff, if you want to call it stuff, before you go into teacher preparation, before you go into the classroom, whether that makes the teacher more effective. So can you learn that stuff ahead of going into a classroom and be more effective for having learned it in the course of your training? For me, it's a no-brainer. I don't know any other profession which deprives the apprentice of the content that will make them more effective doctors or nurses or engineers or scientists. But that's routinely what happens in many teacher preparation programs in the United States. We're not providing that evidence. It's not being taught. And that's why we come at this thing that what's less important than innovation is an attention to what we know works. And so that's the lens we approach this topic today.
Thank you. Ben?
Well, we don't know any of that. Kate says that we know and have answers to all of those questions, and I wish that we did. But the reality is we have some insights to certain aspects of what she describes, but we don't have a true science of educating. And that may be because as a social endeavor, it resists the effort to try to, put your phones away now, please. It resists the effort to try to empirically understand each and everything we can do. We see a lot of things that do apply in certain circumstances that we should absolutely have part of the teacher preparation experience, and there's no disagreement on that. But you take something like classroom management. The notion that we know what works in classroom management would, I think, come as a surprise to a great number of the folks who both are teaching today and those who are thinking about becoming teachers, and those who are responsible for preparing them to become teachers.
That's hogwash. You know as well as I do that there are research-based strategies that allow a teacher to manage classroom behavior better than if she's had no training. There are 5 research-based strategies. The Institute for Education Sciences, which is the government arm of the research arm of U.S. Department of Ed, has identified 5 strategies that improve children's behavior. One of them is if they use meaningful praise, and it's not empty praise, but meaningful praise. So there are things that we absolutely know, and it's odd that you resist the notion that that's not the case, because you pulled something about instructional strategies about how children learn and retain knowledge. That has the same research basis of years and years of research, and your organization has cited it, but for somehow we don't know the same about classroom management I can't resolve the two.
So we're 15 minutes in, and already the first hogwash has come out. That's a record for when Kate and I have debated, so well done today. I'm not disagreeing, again, that there aren't insights into all of the things that you listed, and would certainly, and where we do share an agreement, is that to the extent we have those insights, that we should be ensuring that future teachers are exposed to them, I would certainly agree with. Again, if I can finish the statement this time around, I would say that it is not the case that we can say that we know what works in classroom management. I think the contributors to that IES report would be the first to say that there are some insights that we have from some of the studies that we've done, but the notion that you can take that and tell teachers, here's what works in classroom management, do this, is one that I think you will find a lot of teachers laughing at you hysterically early on in that conversation. And I think that there is a difference between some of the things that Deans for Impact has taken a stand on, like saying we do have what I think is pretty robust empirical scientific evidence around how cognition occurs. Not just in children, frankly, but in all of us. That's a science that has developed over decades and exists. When you said, as you said a moment ago, well, we know that education schools need to be more selective. I'm not familiar with that evidence, and to the extent it's based on what other countries have done, I can point to countries that don't do that and get good results. So I don't think that we actually know what works in all of these. It's actually really, really hard in complicated social endeavors to tease out causal mechanisms.
So let me ask you both a follow-up question, same one to both of you. Ben first. Are there a subset of things that the research does show that are not now being adequately taught to teachers?
Well, I wish I could say we knew for certain, but I would say Deans for Impact wouldn't exist if we didn't have a hypothesis around the fact that there's dramatic opportunity for improvement in that. So yes, in this respect, and this will be boring for folks, but this is where Kate and I agree, is that there does have to be change in what programs do. The question, though, is both in terms of tone, how do we frame sort of what those changes should be, and then I do think in the sort of scope of what actually matters in terms of making those changes.
Kate, do you want to?
I think it's a huge and significant problem in teacher preparation right now, the absence of evidence-based research. Right now, it's the predominant approach to educating future teachers is you decide as a teacher candidate what you think is important and how you will approach your children, because every classroom is utterly unique. Every classroom is completely contextual. We don't have that approach in medicine. We don't have that approach in engineering. We have no other profession where there's less of a corpus about what matters. And that doesn't mean you limit yourself to what the research says or informs us, but we do no favor to a 21-year-old to say, as we know, as having reviewed thousands of early reading courses, that the dominant approach to teaching a 21-year-old how to teach first graders how to read is you'll decide when you get there. You decide based on what feels right for you. You decide your own philosophy. And I think that's a huge injustice to kids, and I think it's an even greater injustice to that teacher who is deprived of what will allow them to be more effective from the first day they walk into the classroom.
Okay, thanks. So let's move on to the second question. You both actually do agree that there are some things we know that should be done more, but differ perhaps in how far. And the next question was, should schools of education radically innovate? So big changes about doing really new and different things. Ben, you want to start on this one?
Yeah. So I think the answer is a cautious yes, because I'm always worried what people mean when they say innovate. When I think of innovation, it's tackling an existing problem, but in a way that addresses it in a hopefully more solutions-oriented and a more effective way. So in that sense, if the quote-unquote problem is that we would like to do better in preparing future educators for the classroom, I think that everybody who has looked at this can think that the United States can improve what we do there. What is the innovation that we'd like to see? Well, at Deans for Impact, what we'd really like to see is that right now there is just a complete disconnect between the sort of experiences that a teacher candidate going to one program has versus going to a different program, or sometimes even in the same program, sort of what experiences they have. And there's very little connection between the theory and the practice. And so one of the things we've done at Deans for Impact is put out a publication called Practice with Purpose, which sort of describes in detail, in some detail anyway, sort of how do you structure a student teaching experience so that you're actually developing teacher ability, teacher skill. And so that's a sort of innovation that comes from the insights and from the studies of the science of expertise, and we're trying to use that and map that to educator preparation. So in that sense, I think there's room for tremendous radical innovation, if you will, in teacher prep.
Okay. Kate?
You know, that's very seductive language, to innovate. And to get up on a stage and say you don't support innovation, you run the risk of, especially at South by Southwest, being run out of town. And I just want to underscore why I come off sounding a little bit like the anti-innovation. The problem is so fundamental and so basic that we're not attending to the most, the baseline knowledge that would allow teachers to walk into a classroom. And yes, innovation's great. I'm certainly not opposed to people always looking for good ideas. I mean, that's what I do in my organization. I'm always trying to push myself to think of new and better ways to do things. But the only reason I'm pushing back here is that there's a bigger problem at hand. And that is what we're not developing that core instruction that every teacher needs. Let me give you an example. I was honored to be invited up to New York, where they're working on how to redo the teacher prep programs in a big system up there. And they've been working on it for 2 years. And every one of the colleges and universities in that system is at the table. The New York State school chief, the legislators, anybody who's anybody in the state of New York on education is a part of that process. And when I was up there at their latest meeting, I've been to a couple, we spent the afternoon debating whether or not there should be a teacher leadership course in the teacher prep programs. And you know, I'm not against teacher leadership. I think teacher leadership's great. I'm not sure that a course could teach someone to be a leader. I've not seen the evidence that that's the case. But more importantly, I thought, you know, this isn't the priority. The priority is that 40% of the kids in the United States aren't learning how to read. They never become a proficient reader. We have the science that will allow us to get that number down to between 5 and 10%, but our programs aren't preparing teachers in that knowledge. So is scientifically based reading instruction, is that innovative? I guess it is, because so many aren't doing it. But so you see, I'm not opposed to innovation, but I don't think it is the first problem at hand in what's wrong with teacher prep.
So then let me ask you, could you pick one radical innovation that's a bad idea?
One radical innovation that's a bad, well, there's many radical innovations that are bad. I mean,
Pick one that'll be
I won't out this particular program, but we visited a lot of the programs that our member deans lead. And there was on a visit, we saw the usage of like hovering your iPhone or any phone over a piece of paper, and out popped, like if A for Apple, and up popped an apple in sort of augmented virtual reality, right? And I stared at that and went, so what? Like what, I mean, I could just have a picture of an apple. I'm not quite sure why the cool augmented, component of it. So in this sense, like there is always the danger of sort of getting seduced by the bells and whistles. And we're at perhaps an event that is, the pantheon of bell and whistle potential, but also real substantive conversation. But I want to go back to something that Kate said and sort of address it. There's this notion that like I'm not sure what back to basics means. I wouldn't disagree that there's we need to understand and have those basics happening. But what's interesting in the field of education is that people sort of fetishize professional education in the other professions. So education is always sort of going, if only we had the body of knowledge like they have in medicine, or the body of knowledge like they have in law, and sort of the structured approaches they do. Well, those fields are actually trying to undo some of that right now. They are actually examining, and a lot of those practices were just sort of arbitrarily chosen, And people have this figured out. I mean, I was trained as an attorney. I went to law school. Can tell you, I was not ready to practice as an attorney when I finished. And so we have a tendency, I think, for those who have only spent time in one field to think that everything is sort of like more structured and rigorous there. It might be that it's to the advantage of the field of education that it hasn't gone through that process, and so that there is more flexibility in approach if, and it's a big if it can be combined with the rigors of using evidence-based practices and using scientifically informed insights.
But I'm talking exactly in those terms when it comes to what was wrong with law school, is that you weren't ready to be a lawyer. I want to make sure that everyone coming out of a teacher prep program can walk into the classroom on the first day and have some knowledge of what it will take to keep kids learning and happy and engaged in what they're doing. I want the teacher to know something about how to teach math, especially at the elementary level. I want them to know something about teaching reading. I want them to practice it. And that's something a law school never would have done, is have you go practice law before you become a lawyer. So,
That's not true, though, Kate. Yes, I mean, they absolutely do. It's called clinical training.
Well,
I mean, they do that.
They're not
Hogwash.
they're not talking about. But I'll raise an innovation that I think is a problem, and that is the year-long student teaching that's now called year-long residencies. Now it's become very fashionable to say half a year's time in student teaching isn't enough, and you need to have a full year or else you're being irresponsible. And we have actually pushed back on that notion, not that we think there's anything wrong with having a year's experience versus half a year, or calling it a residency versus student teaching, but our problem with it is that guess who are the guinea pigs? It's kids. So we think there ought to be a lot more role playing, a lot more videotaping, a lot more time in controlled environments before you are unleashed into a student teaching arrangement. And we think that one of the problems that student teaching is so broken, making it twice as long isn't going to fix it.
Okay, so let's move on to our third topic. If folks have had a chance to look at the exhibition hall, there's all sorts of things, but South by Southwest, lots of them are technology. So how important is it that future teachers, when they're getting their formal training, be trained in technology? Okay.
Well, we do look for evidence that teachers are using technology when they're being observed as student teachers and they're applying relevant technology. But I would not say NCTQ gets high marks on having established what that body of knowledge is, because we don't know what it is, and everything I read points in the kind of nobody's exactly sure. I mean, one of the first questions we asked was to Rocket Ship, back when Rocket Ship was the new kid on the block and everybody was running towards it. And we said, what do you need your new teachers to know before they get in the classroom with technology? And they said, no, we don't need anything. And we just need an average 21-year-old who is proficient in technology. So I think that what troubles me about the personalized learning body, what teachers ought to know is that we just haven't established what it is. And there's a new report out by, I don't know what the acronym stands for, NAATE, and they do professional development work. And they go through rather exhaustively with Chan Zuckerberg money, trying to figure out what it is that personalized learning means for teacher prep. And the questions they come away with are a bit of an indictment on what it is teachers are supposed to know to be better personalized learning or better technology driven. So, let me give you one final little anecdote. We think everybody ought to get a methods course that teaches them the technology and the subject they're going to teach, okay? So we go and look for whether, if you're going to be a chemistry teacher, do you take a chemistry methods course? Well, 25% of programs don't even require you to take the methods course in your subject. So they just say general methods. So for us, this gets back to my innovation point. Just one step away from that is how to use technology to teach chemistry better in your class. And I'm sure there are oodles of great things you could use to be a chemistry teacher with technology. But again, we need to concentrate also on making sure we're also getting that methods class in.
Ben?
Yeah, so I don't know if we disagree or not. I was trying to figure out if you were saying we should teach technology to future teachers. I mean, I think I can answer it in the short version in the form of a question, which is, does anyone have the experience that institutions of higher education move at the same speed as does technological innovation? That one sink in for a second. I think we know the answer to that.
I got that answer.
On the other hand, one of the things that I think is exciting about becoming an educator today is the potential for making use of all of these tools that are out there. Here's what I think. I think it's a bad idea to try to say, here's a course on all the tools that are out there. Let's go through them one by one and spend an hour a day for a semester taking a look at them. If instead you were preparing teachers to be scientific practitioners, meaning that they were going to think about what's taking place in the minds of my students, how will I assess what sort of learning is taking place? How could I design instructional activities that will maximize cognitive engagement? And how will I know after I've done those activities whether or not that learning's taken place? And then, after those questions have been put on the table, then think about how does technology play a role? And I think if we had teachers and educators, principals of all sorts who were thinking about those questions first, then the question around technology takes care of itself.
Okay, you guys are sort of agreeing, so we should definitely stop with there.
Yeah.
And let's open it up to questions. So the great South by Southwest crew, which has been doing the filming and helping us with the mics and everything, they've also got some people who are going to wander around with wireless mics. And so we'll ask that folks raise their hand and wait until somebody gets to you with a mic so that everybody can hear and it can get recorded for posterity. So let's open it up for questions. Yeah, thanks.
So one of the challenges that we see right now in pre-service teaching is that schools of education are being forced to get students ready for a myriad of new models. So in Philadelphia, for example, you have situations where students could be going into the innovation networks, pre-service teachers can be going into innovation network schools, which is my world. They could be going to Mastery or KIPP. They could go into traditional public ed. How do schools of education handle what has now become a much wider array of schools that their students might have to go to?
I'm sure you can disagree on this one, Ben.
Well, I think that there's different approaches to that. So one would be, and what I think Kate probably doesn't disagree on this, is that having a closer connection between the schools that the teachers you're preparing are going to go into and the programs that prepare those teachers is almost surely to the good. In fact, there's research that shows that the more you can sort of match the student teaching experience with the actual practical experience. So if you can form those connections and those relationships and then be able to sort of map backwards from, so here's what those schools will ask, so let's figure out how to set up pathways to get to that. So that's one way, is to actually differentiate based on where you're sending folks. But the flip side of that would be, again, to, Deans for Impact put out a publication. It was one of the first things that we did called The Science of Learning. It's similar to other things that people have said around, here are some basic things we know about how learning takes place. If you start with that as the foundation, then the models that you're going into are sort of pedagogically, they have different approaches. But what you're saying is, let's start with the foundation of thinking about what's taking place in the mind of the learner, what's taking place in the mind of the student. And I actually think it's a good thing that we have some variability in sort of the pedagogical approaches. But what you need to have is some sort of anchor, some sort of foundation to help you sort of sort through, are these things that I'm, like, just as a potential future educator, is that the sort of school I want to teach in because its pedagogical approach aligns with what I believe about learning? Or should I have some suspicions about some of the things I'm being sold here as the right approach?
Okay.
Exactly. That's
right.
exactly my point.
We are not going to leave this with agreement. So I'm an economist, so I need numbers. If you were to pick a percentage that everybody trained in a school of education should have in common. That is a percentage of the total things they do. What fraction should be pretty much the same everywhere? Kate? This is why people hate economists. We always ask.
75%.
Ben?
I guess I'm tempted to say it'd be around 30%, but I would say that like that's because in my world a lot of the pre-service preparation will be experiential, and so a lot of it will be tied and connected to the sort of schools that teacher candidates are going through.
Okay, that's good. They're disagreeing again. Next question.
Hi, I'm a PhD student from Canada, and I was interested in 2 points. The first being the idea that we don't have a core corpus of research or a body in education. I think that's a salient point also because in education, as a social discipline dealing with people, we've borrowed quite heavily from other disciplines.
Exactly.
So when you compare it to engineering and those kinds of things, it's hard because we're talking about natural science. So we've, talking about teacher development and leader development, we've borrowed heavily uncritically from business literature, let's say, and we're trying to undo that and kind of, situate where education is. But going back to the theme of, I think this talk is educational innovation overrated? Part of the issue to me, and I don't know if it is to the economists on the panel as well, is this kind of uncriticality about discussing what innovation actually is. And it doesn't seem that when we talk in a lot of these sessions that there's a robust understanding of what innovation is. I would argue that some of the points you've made have been talking about improvement, not innovation, which actually represents a fundamental change that is different, but just an improvement to something that was already good and working, but we've amended it. And I think if we don't agree on what innovation actually is, it's hard to discuss it. So my question for you is how we get, because again, it's a field borrowing from every other fields as well, innovation. How do we get teacher, leaders, and preparation programs to situate themselves within a conversation where we're discussing about innovation similar and not just kind of as an abstract notion?
Ben?
So I disagree with you, Canadian PhD person in the dark. I can barely see.
I can come to the light if you want a better look.
I turned from Kate to disagreeing with the lovely commenters. So I don't think of innovation in the sense that you might have been suggesting, which I think of as sort of experimentation or invention. Right? So like I went to this brilliant speech by the editor of Francis Ford Coppola's film, a guy named Ed Murch, and he talked about what is innovation and what really drives creativity. And it gave me one of my life mantras, which is that constraint drives creativity. And he said, if you don't believe me, open up one of those magazines used to see, you don't see them as often anymore, on those long distance flights that have all those things in them for sale. You know, like some sort of weird, yeah, right. It's fascinating. But like on-ramps and they're solving, there's like, crazy stuff, radically curious, interesting stuff, solving problems that no one has. And so that's like where you have the experimentation and the creation that hasn't been constrained by anything. So when I think of innovation, and this may just be personally, it's really got to be bounded, and it's an existing problem. And so I think of like the most classic example that I like is there's fighting fires with new and better engines, or there's smoke detectors. Right? Now that to me is like what I think of when I think of innovation. Existing problem, fires that start, totally different way that's more economical, that's more efficient. When we take it back, and having now talked about in-flight magazines and fire engines, when we take it back to teacher preparation, I think we have a pretty good understanding of what the set of problems are. It is evolving to the previous question around what the expectations are for teachers, but we all agree that we could be doing a better job preparing them, so that's a bounded problem. Now we just need to get creative and innovative in how we address it.
Okay.
That's good. I'm agreeing with.
Oh, next. Who's got the next mic? Okay.
Maybe we get some further insight if we look backwards. So I want you to think about what's been a major innovation in the past that's had a profound impact. Now, when I taught graduate school, I always led with my two favorite from the 20th century. The innovations at the graduate level in the 20th century that I think had the most profound impact were electric lights and women.
And women? I didn't know we
An
were...
awkward note. So, Kate, do you want to, being a woman, I don't
so
even
you
know
want
how
me
to
to
respond
you
to
want
that.
me to come up with an innovation that
How about a historical one that's either good or bad?
so
Maybe abandoned, I don't know.
yeah. Well, I mean, education has nothing but. I mean, we've just got, and most of our innovations prove to be a bit of a disappointment in the long run, and I fear that some of the ones that are very popular today will be ones that are sort of gone out of style in no time. I mean, I do think that for example, if you look at the arc of how we've prepared teachers over the years, there's been the training module. We used to believe that we train teachers for the classroom, and now that's a dirty word in many preparation programs. They say that that disrespects their loftier role that they must play in forming a professional identity. So now, and there's a social justice model, which sounds good. I think it's critically important. I think education is the pathway to achieve social justice, but how it's taught in schools of education, that social justice component is very much decoupled from the importance of raising student achievement, which is how you achieve social justice. So I think that there are trends which are labeled to be innovations, or to the Canadian in the darks reference, maybe just improvement. But I think that that's the risk we take.
Just a couple of quick points. So to the electric light bulb comment, it's interesting because a quote that I often use when talking about education innovation is that Thomas Edison himself had a quote that, within 10 years after the invention of talking pictures, that teachers would be obsolete. So when we use that to sort of as he was a pretty smart guy, Tom Edison, and so these predictions have been around before. I'm not quite sure, sir, what you meant by women, and I'm sure you meant something perhaps along the lines of the fact that our culture has made tremendous inroads, still a long way to go, but made tremendous inroads. I think if you looked at the faculty and on programs and things like that have changed. Again, a lot of work still to be done, but if we want to call social progress along that dimension innovation, I'm right there with you. And the last thing I'll say is that I want to start an indie group called Canadians in the Dark. I think that's going to be
That is good.
You need to understand that Canadians tend to be modest and not put themselves out front, and so this is just normal Canadian. No, really. This is what my Canadian wife tells me. It may depend which province you're from.
There's somebody way back.
Yeah, somebody in the back.
Am I in the dark?
No, you actually have a little halo.
Cool, okay. Well, I wanted to ask your opinion in regards to teacher preparation beyond the preparation, because what I keep hearing is preparing teachers through a program, and then what? And having been an educator for over 16 years, private, public, I felt very underserved when it came to, after I graduated from the certification program or from the credential program, then what? So I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on that, to really help with student success, but really to kind of turn on this head the idea of teachers running away from the profession 2 years into the profession.
Kate, first.
The solution to professional development is going to have to be a mutiny by teachers. I'm convinced that if we look to districts and states to solve the problem of bad professional development, we are just having the fox guard the hen house. And I've been in way too many meetings where we sat there navel-gazed for 3 or 4 days at the expense of the Gates Foundation or whoever to try to figure out how to make professional development work. When I think, in fact, the best research I've seen on professional development, which is not this overwhelming body of knowledge like we have for other things, it's that teachers working with other teachers on problems of practice, very much immersed in the curriculum, the content that is being taught. That's how you make professional development work. I guess the big stumbling block for a group like mine is to try to figure out what it's going to take to inspire teachers to stand up and say, enough, we're taking charge, we're taking over. So, but the solution is never going to come from the district, unless the district just simply finds a way to empower teachers to work constructively together.
So thank you for that question. It's an inspiring one because you're absolutely right. We've talked a lot up here sort of about the pre-classroom experience, the pre-service side. A culture shift has to happen, and I may be guilty in this talk of reinforcing it, which is that the obligation of programs that prepare teachers they don't stop at the moment that they graduate and get certified and then go on. And the programs that we see that take what's called induction support seriously, it's inspiring. I'll just use one quick example. The Boston Teacher Residency in Boston goes and provides ongoing induction support to the teachers that it's prepared for years into their career. I've actually shadowed and had the opportunity to watch this happen with we throw the phrase around like a master mentor teacher, but when you see one who's going into a classroom, and then you're watching a 10-year veteran educator get feedback from this master mentor who's been doing it for twice or 3 times that, and they're able to talk about, so what went right in that lesson? What went wrong? How are you going to think about what you're going to revisit? That, to me, is about as excited as I get doing the work that we do at Deans for Impact. And if we could spread that gospel throughout our nation's teacher preparation programs, you would see so much improvement, I think, in the retention rates of teachers who do fall into that, early stage, didn't get the proper preparation, they don't get the support, and now they're just like, I'm just gonna leave, I'm gonna exit the profession. And I also think you'd create a sense of professional identity that would be very different than the one that may exist today.
Yeah.
Let me push back a little bit on that, because I totally, and I think what Boston Residency does is great. My experience with higher ed trying to do that, continuing that relationship, like a bunch of higher ed programs have said, we stand behind our product, so to speak, and if you're not happy with the new teacher you get, we'll come in and we'll fix it. And that makes a lot of splash in the morning newspaper that they're guaranteeing their results, but it never seems to pan out in actuality. And I think it's, and I'm not sure why this is, but I think there's a huge discomfort on the part of schools about having college faculty too much in these buildings. This is my impression. So I'm not suggesting that is the way it should be. I'm just saying that there is that tension between schools wanting higher ed to just go back to doing what they're doing.
Let me ask you both a more pointed question. Teacher prep is, I don't remember the exact number, but it's several % of the education budget between release time, staff in the school districts, bringing in consultants and stuff like that. No doubt there's some that are wonderful and some that aren't, but if your only choices were to stop everything that's done now and spend it on some other way, would you do that or not? That is, you're not allowed to fix it. If the option was, let's keep all the in-service training and the money spent for it and keep doing exactly what we're doing, or spend the money in a better way, which would you go for?
For PD or for pre-service? Professional development or
development
pre-service?
after you're in the class.
Oh, you're not allowed to fix it?
No, you're not allowed to fix it. Teachers don't always have total
stop
control.
doing it. Oh, no brainer, stop doing it.
Is this one of those assume a can opener questions that the economists?
Yes,
redesign it.
You can't redesign. You said
No,
you're
that
not
wasn't
allowed
one of
to
the
fix
options.
Okay, whatever the opposite of
Give
what
it-
Kate said.
yeah.
Okay, next question from the audience.
I had a question.
Thank you.
And I have the mic. So.
And now you're totally in the dark.
Yeah. Oh, am I? I thought I was
Yeah.
in line. At any rate, I want to build off this question. I was dying to ask the question just about, like, so when you hand off to us and we're in schools as teachers, what are some suggestions you've seen in how people grow? And you answered that, I think, on how teachers become better once they're in. You talked about that. My question is is to ask you guys, do you disagree or agree or see any daylight on the following version of, if I'm a teacher and I'm teaching now, one of the things I've noticed that people, when they they get better and they learn over time. They try things. And so one definition of innovation might be, just like you said, right? I have a real life problem I'm trying to fix. And so I try something I never tried before. Some people might say that's what teachers do all the time. Do you have any comment on that? Do you guys agree that often teachers try things that they don't do before? It doesn't work, sometimes it does, and that's how we learn and grow? Anything to say about that?
That's so essential. I mean, that's a Japanese lesson study. In fact, I was talking about that ahead of the session with somebody. And there is a group that's just started that's trying to get Japanese lesson study to be much more absorbed into American culture. But that's a group of teachers who are all teaching the same thing, and they learn from the mistakes as well as what worked. And instead of the teacher working by herself and figuring out her lesson on how to compare fractions was a total bust, she's talking about that with her colleagues and saying, here's how not to do this. Anybody have some ideas on how to do it better? So that's real, I mean, that's real growth. And that's the model that's used in Japan and a lot in most Asian nations, and I think that the results speak for themselves.
Well, we disagree on this a little bit. So, you know, one of the interesting ironies of innovation in this practice is that it may actually be beneficial for teachers, at least for the early part of their careers, to create routines where they're not having to experiment with some of the activities that are sort of basic. So the New Visions for New Public Schools has these things they call instructional activities. Boston Teacher Residency, you say them again, also focus on them. Deborah Ball at Teaching Works has these high leverage practices that are enumerated, and there's a creation of routines. And it's interesting to bring up in the context of Asian nations, because there was just this book that was published called Cleverlands, where this teacher went and embedded in various countries. It's an excellent book, by the way. There's a review of it up on Education Next. And one of the things that, one of the anecdotes that was shared was there was an American teacher in Shanghai who was sort of watching and saying, actually, in Shanghai, a great deal of the teaching procedures have been turned into routines. Over time, as those become inculcated and become sort of second nature, then you start to see experimentation by the teacher. But in the early days, it's actually far more prescriptive. And frankly, that was, you know, everyone loves to talk about EduDarling Finland and how wonderful it is, but they actually developed a fairly highly structured set. So again, it's not to push back.
He's right.
No, okay.
Stop
He is right.
I'll just stop right there.
Oh, but let me actually be a little bit provocative following up on the question. People in this area who come to South by Southwest are looking for innovation. They may be looking for things they should stop doing. Right? They're really open to learning and to change. There are a lot of teachers in the country. What do we say about what I suspect is the fairly large number who actually aren't so open to change, et cetera? So I should say everybody in the room is very pro-teacher. Doesn't mean you're happy with what 100% of the profession is doing.
Yeah, it's been one of the great communications failures of my professional time has been to watch what happened with teacher evaluation. You know, all the ed reformers like myself were out there, you know, trying to get laws passed that had teachers evaluated, and what makes more sense than having teachers evaluated on how effective they are in the classroom, and then America got upset about test scores, and there's huge brouhaha, and lost in that, and we lost the argument with teachers so far. I don't think it's over yet, because I think that in places which have put in more meaningful evaluations, like Washington, D.C., and some places in Tennessee and others, I think teachers have realized that meaningful evaluation is actually helpful, and it's not a gotcha moment, but it actually advances them. So it is a concern that the politics of what would make the profession healthier and make everyone feel more valued in the long run got lost in some pretty trivial, I would say, and unfair blasts about what it means to measure effectiveness?
Yeah, so it's a good question, Dick. I mean, I think it actually gets something Kate and I disagree about quite profoundly, which is how do you change culture? And let's buy the premise for a moment that the culture of education needs to change in some ways. Let's use the world we're talking about right now, the world of preparing future educators, but I think it applies equally to the classroom. If you tell people, do this, they will resist. They will resist. But if instead you find ways to connect with them and to build a relationship and to gather their trust, we talk a lot at my organization about sneaky learning, the sort of thing where you just sort of model the behavior that you hope to see. But it involves actually building that relationship. So our theory of change is that we hope as the programs that prepare future educators take on this rigor that we've been describing in this conversation, they'll be able to start to send that new wave of educators into those schools who will then be able to share what they've learned and be part of that culture, and it will take decades. It will take decades, and that frustrates philanthropists, that frustrates policymakers, but we have a big cultural transformation that we are trying to lead, and it starts by figuring out the vision of what we want to have at the end.
I think we're
Well, I
being
disagree, but
Okay.
that's okay.
I think we're being told that we should wind it up. So can you guys,
All right, so this is the second part of the technology.
this is the second part of the technology where you get to vote on the winner. I'm not quite sure why there's a winner or loser, but that's what we're going to do. And while we're doing that, you want to each have like 1 minute to do something. Ben,
Well, again, thank you to all of those of you who came here today.
can you move to the next?
There we go.
Wonderful.
So,
You guys are nice.
yeah, you guys be less
nice.
nice.
Oh, you're coming up. You're coming up.
Yeah, it looks like a dead
Dick
heat.
won.
Yeah.
I think Dick wins too. If you haven't read his book, Profit of Education, please do.
I was just going to say thank you to all of you who came here today. I will be self-serving. I've mentioned this publication, Practice with Purpose. We actually have copies of it over by those bright lights over there, so you're welcome to pick it up. And resources available on our website. But despite the disagreements that we've tried to surface here, there's one thing that Kate and I absolutely agree upon, which is that the glass of wine as well, which, by the way, we're having a happy hour at Deans for Impact on Wednesday, 2000 East 6th Street, 5 p.m. You're welcome to come. But in addition to that, this work is fundamental to this country. And though we have some disagreements about how we're going to get there, the fact that all of you are participating in something like this shows, I think, a commitment to caring about it as much as we all need to. So I'm really appreciative of that.
Yeah, just here.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. And also, let's have a hand for the crew who's been making this all work.